And of course, Matt Connolly for running for District 7, Congress in Pennsylvania. Please welcome them to the stage.
Come on, let's hear it.
Okay, there should be a seat for everybody. Look at you.
Well, guys, thank you very much for coming out today, and let's hear it for Washington Elite, guys. So today we're going to talk a little about something about the future of crypto, right? So everybody here wants everybody to have a crystal ball, but a lot of us don't know, right? I'm out there, I'm looking at CoinGecko, I'm looking at CoinMarketCap, trying to figure out what's going to happen. And what is going to happen out there in the next year, 2, 3 years for crypto in general, Bitcoin and other projects. So let's start off with, can we just get like a quick minute about who you are and how you got in the space? Just real quick, like a minute.
Real quick, okay. Well, basically I started in 2013, just buying 30% of my salary in Bitcoin. In 2015, I founded the company in Brazil. We started with asset management and OTC. And now we created the stable coin. That's how I got into the space.
Fantastic, thank you.
I'm Sindhu Bhaskar. I'm the director of ESC Capital ESC Global. I've been a banker for the last 33 years. I'm going to
Make sure you're talking into the mic, guys.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Matt Connolly, running for Congress, Pennsylvania, District 7. I got involved in Bitcoin as a bystander pretty much when it first came out about 2011. Full disclosure, I did not understand it or what crypto stuff meant. And to me, it seemed like so easily manipulable. It could be a potential scam. The more I learned about it, the more I realized, you know what? This is the future. This is the thing that can take care of the double spend, the government overreach, etc. Got together with some fellow-minded people, founded Block 5 Capital, which is an investing hedge fund, advisory, and consultant for the space. I did a lot of educating of myself through many different things. Also realized that we've got to make sure that when the government regulations come down, we have to have people involved who understand it and who are going to protect the people who are the innovators and not just penalize them.
Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Zali Rouimi. I got into the space around 2015, but more heavily in 2017. I started in mining, started a data center in Canada, then followed by Miami, and now more recently Venezuela. And I started a non-profit organization called the Blockchain Crypto Mining Association for both its 501(c) nonprofit, in addition to my mining business, and more recently have also started a crypto ATM business here in South Florida.
Thank you so much. Can we have it quiet down? Because we got a panel going on, guys. Hello? Can we have it a little quieter? Thank you so much. So I'm Rob McNeely. I do a podcast at robmcneely.com. I focus on both small business and the crypto space. In addition, I'm the co-founder of TUSC, which stands for the Universal Settlement Coin, which is a non-ICO community project focused on the gun space. That's all I'm going to say about me right now. So to begin, I want to hear all the panelists kind of feeling on where the future of crypto is going to be from, say, the regulatory environment as you see it over, say, the next 1 to 3 years. Let's start on the end.
Okay, being that I'm in the mining space, I mean, we have a lot of difficulties. We already saw actually regulatory implications from energy companies. Just for example, in Quebec, when they started getting excited with all these miners that were coming in with cheap electricity for mining and blockchain, they jumped the gun and started requiring immediately all sorts of mining licenses. And unfortunately, it had a reverse effect and kind of scared away everybody. So I think that more that governments are starting to realize that if they're going to enter and start regulating, they obviously have to do it slowly. Like it was mentioned before, better understand blockchain, because I feel like the government does not fully understand it the way they should.
Yeah, I think most of us would agree with that.
As far as the industry and regulation, thank you. Gotta eat the microphone. What's interesting is, there have been countries where they've tried to ban it. North Korea, China. you can't ban something that is completely decentralized, you can't put your hands on it, and is virtually untraceable as far as your transaction where it originates. So they're going to have to live with it, and they're going to have a problem with that because in a lot of ways the accountability and the deep transparency and traceability of blockchain and its transaction is something that in many ways is a threat to a lot of government and government spending, because if anyone's famous for the double spend, it's government. So they're going to try to do it. First of all, they're going to come across as we're here for the consumer, we want to prevent fraud, we want to make sure no one loses anything, and then they're going to realize they're going to do it to save their own practices, their own lack of accountability. So I don't think that cryptocurrency is going to go anywhere. It's like the .com. You know, the internet was never a fad. It had its ebbs and its flows, but it's here to stay, and it is so integrated into our lives that it's never going to change. And the thing about the internet, it runs by itself. You can't turn it off. There's no switch because it runs on everyone else's programs and ISPs and everything else. And crypto was the same way. And the more we realize that the more people use it, the more it self-sustains. It becomes its own immutable ecosystem. So the government is going to have to take a back seat. Regulation is going to have to come in very small doses, and it's going to have to be made by people who understand it, or they're honestly going to screw it up, and it's only going to hurt the people who follow the rules.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to answer. Generally, we are living in the world of political economy. So economy is guided by the polity. So I don't think any polity is going to make any compromise on crypto and allow crypto to kill the fiat economy. So my viewpoint is that fiat economy will continue. Blockchain will also survive in particular sectors. Crypto will also come in for investments and as different assets for wealth management. But it is not going to substitute the fiat economy and the political economy. There's my viewpoint, most humbly and stated.
Thank you.
To bring another point of view as well, when you think about some countries, for example, like Brazil, regulators are looking at the subject more in a knee-jerk reaction thing, because a lot of scams were run, well, in Brazil they were present, and they used the name of Bitcoin just to run the scams, Ponzi schemes and everything. We know it's not related to Bitcoin, but consumers, they bought it, then they got burned, and they said, oh, it's Bitcoin. So the regulator in Brazil is probably going to be extremely harsh because of that. In terms of Switzerland, the experience I had is the ICO boom kind of gave the same to the regulators, because a lot of scammy ICOs, and the regulators said, okay, I don't want to deal with that in a friendly way anymore. So that's what we have to take care. We have to separate the good projects from the bad projects and try to influence the policymakers to actually look at it as, from the technology side and not from the bad business case side. Right? So that's my take on the regulation. I mean, we have to be careful not to let the business cases take over the technology itself. Right? So that's it.
Thank you. So a little more nuanced spin on that. How do you guys see where enforcement is going to go over the next year or 2 years? We know that in the United States that most of the ICO projects over the past few years are likely illegal securities under U.S. law. How do you think that's going to play out going forward?
I mean, I guess it depends in what sector and what the ICO, where they're operating, but I think it's going to take some time. Of course, you've got your cases where they want to make an example of somebody, but I think there's a lot of learning to do for the governments and in general. I mean, just an example in my ATM business. I mean, it took me months and months to find out. I mean, just for the state of Florida, what are the requirements for a money transmitter's license to handle? I mean, even if we're doing all the KYC, ML, etc., nobody would give me a clear answer. So you can hire an attorney, you can work as hard as you can to try to be within regulatory rules, but are you really? So I think that we're all susceptible somewhat to some surprise of some sort, But I think that until it's more clearly defined what the regulatory rules are, then only at that point will they be able to further enforce them.
And I think you make a great point on the lack of understanding, clarity, and consistency across the states. I live in the state of Utah. And in the state of Utah, they actually will not give a money transmitter license to a crypto business because they don't view it as money under the state.
One perfect example.
Thank you.
As far as some things, the IRS has yet to reconcile cost basis for a lot of tax valuation purposes. For example, you can take a hard fork off of a certain currency, and it becomes very difficult to establish the cost basis when you want to calculate your capital gain. Should you, you're supposed to report that on your taxes. The other issue is, what is cryptocurrency? Since you can never hold it in your hand, is it truly a security? For example, if you walk through the airport after an international flight and you have $20,000 in currency and you don't declare it, well, that's a crime because 10,000 is the limit. But what if you walk through security and you've got the code in your head, your password and key in your head of your Bitcoin account that's worth $20,000, and you don't tell them? Did you just violate the law? Well, of course you did, because it's free speech. So there's a lot of challenges, and that's part of the decentralization paradox that comes with this kind of crypto security. The money transmitter license is going to go on a state-by-state basis. And one of the things about a country like America, where you have 50 little independent laboratories of democracy, you're going to find some states that get it completely right and some that get it mostly wrong. And with that, hopefully the states that get it wrong will learn from the states that get it right, and the ones that are holding out are waiting for the right answer. But people are going to vote with their feet, and the money transmitters are going to move to the states that are most favorable or most fair to crypto. And I think that's what we're going to see, but it's still such in its infancy that there haven't been enough cases. And of course, fraud is fraud. That should never be looked this way. I mean, when someone's going to defraud someone, they're going to do it with a Ponzi scheme, crypto, anything you want to do it. So you can't blame the crypto for the person who does the fraud. It just unfortunately might get it some negative publicity. But it's going to come down to some cases that are not high-profile cases, but solid, constant, regular cases that help establish proper rules and regulations.
Thank you. Yeah, I think you can compare like the rules in New York versus the rules in Wyoming, for instance. Thank you.
Yeah, what I feel that still, whatever we may call it, but we are in an era of decentralized centralization, and we are going to follow it. There cannot be unbridled liberty, because we are a multitude of masses. Everyone has his own viewpoint, and if everyone starts exerting their freedom and liberty, we are going to have a clash. And society is a matter of compromise, so we have to have certain regulations guiding everything, and nothing can be called a total destructive measure for the regulatory mechanism.
Thank you.
Well, in terms of securities regulation, I do believe that in some countries that can be used as an instrument to put the bar this high and, well, prevent newcomers to actually get into the market. Because the securities laws in most of the countries, they are pretty clear. And they're usually very restrictive in terms of who can operate that market. So I, for example, find the SEC extremely arbitrary in most of the cases and decisions that they make. And unfortunately, the Brazilian CVM, which is the SEC there, they take the example of the American one, and it's not easy. And yeah, I mean, we have a paradigm and also a challenge in front of us to actually understand that maybe the securities regulation has to change. In a sense that it has to be easier for companies to operate in that market, and the bar should be a bit lower now, since mostly everything that has a smart contract in the eyes of some regulators are securities. Even asset-backed tokens or investments like arbitrage products, they are considered securities in a lot of jurisdictions. So should I have like a banking license to do so? I guess not. So maybe we have to review those regulations in order to make it more democratic in a sense.
Thank you. Just hold on to the mic for a second. So I guess the next question is maybe it's not the future crypto kind of question, but what's your take on, at least in the United States, accredited investor laws? Are they a good thing? Are they a bad thing?
Well, I don't think In the United States, is this self-declaratory or not? The accredited investor thing. If it's self-declaratory, I think it's it's just like there as something to be signed by someone. Yeah, I'm an accredited investor. However, in some countries, they do require that you prove that you have that amount of assets in order to become an accredited investor. Just to give you a brief example, no funds in Brazil can hold cryptocurrencies directly, nor they can invest in foreign funds that hold cryptocurrency more than 20% of their portfolio. So that's a clear barrier for this kind of business. And even if you are an accredited investor or a qualified investor or an ultra high net worth guy, and you say, I'm fully aware that the money is mine and I can lose it all, you cannot do it. So I don't know to what extent we should keep those limitations to protect the public. In the end, as I say usually to the Brazilian regulator, you protect the public so much that the figure of the investor doesn't exist. We have more investors in cryptocurrencies in numbers than investors in the stock market in Brazil, because the limitations are too high. I mean, it's not easy.
Thank you.
Well, these are the natural barriers that all the regulators are trying to create, and they will keep on moving with such paradigms to make the road full of obstacles, and they don't ultimately clash with the political ambitions of the government of the land.
Thank you. What's your take? Accredited investors laws, yay or nay?
I would say nay. Here's a perfect example. You can have a person every day spend $10 they can't afford on a lottery ticket, hoping one day they're going to hit it big, and they will slowly spend down themselves to become a hand-to-mouth person who has no future. But God forbid you let that person invest some of their money in a coin or in a token or something like that that might quadruple 100 times in value. If you can let them make small mistakes and do it on a daily basis where the odds are incredibly against them, but have you noticed that benefits the state? Because the lottery goes to the state, the profits, not to anybody else. Yet you won't let them make their own decision on a well thought out idea of a cryptocurrency they might believe in. So no, I'm not for them.
Thank you.
I'm a little bit mixed on the idea, but I would say that because of all the fraud we've seen with ICOs, and I guess we're all victims of that in some way or shape or form. I would say that if maybe they can go through some sort of a screening or whatever it is that has to do that is regulated, and not necessarily need the investor to be accredited, but to go through more of a checkup process before they can be traded, in an exchange, for example. So I think it would make the difference between an accreditation required more for more versus like an ICO that is more of an idea versus one that is actually in place, an actual real business.
So hold the microphone. So, next question. Do you think crypto winter will be over in 2020? Do you think crypto winter will be over in 2020?
Well, I believe that crypto is on its way up very soon. I think that in 2020 we're going to see a lot of new adoption. Just the amount of large institutions that are getting involved right now, I think is definitely going to be a big play. Because I'm coming from the mining background, we're seeing major utility companies and countries in general that are taking on mining as a whole. So when you start having governments get involved in mining and blockchain and mining supporting the blockchain, then I think that there's definitely going to be some growth and some openings towards that.
Great take.
Okay, so the crypto winter, I don't think we can call it. Will it be over in 2020? Probably not. I think we have to look at when blockchain and crypto start solving more problems in our daily life is when it will start to grow. What we saw at the end of 2017 was the end of an irrational exuberance, to use a phrase, of people buying something because it was going to the moon and they didn't know any better. They didn't know what it was, but if it was going up, they were going to get on that ride. It wasn't a true valuation, and that's going to end up what happened. I remember when Amazon.com started at $8,
went up to 275, crashed back down to 12, and Jeff Bezos said, my stock started at 8, and 6 months later it's at 12. What's wrong with that? Well, he was right, except the people who lost, their you-know-whats when it was 275 and they had to sell it for 90. So the more problems it solves, the more people can intelligently use it and buy it based on its value. It's going to take a long, slow, but steady growth, and that's best for everybody.
Great takes.
I'll again come to the same conclusion that we are not going to get rid of this Bitcoin because see the changes in different countries. Estonia, which was supposed to be so open for different exchanges and all that, they have started changing their regulations, started stipulating capital requirement and all that. China is, of course, coming out with blockchain and cryptocurrency. Now you know the nature of China and the nature of their government, such unitary centralized government. Do you think, is it going to come out with a decentralized cryptocurrency regulation? No way. So you have to see that those countries who are trying to match the crypto revolution, they are trying to give it a unitary and centralized direction. And that is why they are coming out in the market so that they can control the whole flow and stream. And that is why, again, I will just like to give you the example of my banking system. We are the digital bank wherein we are following all the Basel III norms. Have you heard of any digital bank talking of any Basel III norms and all that? But we are doing it because you cannot segregate the regulatory measures with your crypto freedom and openness and decentralization. There is nothing absolute in this nature and it can never be. That is my conclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My take on it is that the world is actually, the picture looks bad every year. Europe can dismantle, the US can go in another financial crisis. Latin America is a mess every 4 years. So isn't that the perfect scenario for cryptocurrencies? So if you consider cryptocurrencies, especially Bitcoin, an anti-cyclical asset or a safety haven, a gold 2.0, whatever you call it, there is no brighter future for crypto than the future we are going to experience in a few years. That's my take on it.
Okay, we're on our last question here, folks. So, kind of piggybacking and segueing off that last question, do you see mass adoption happening in 2020? And if so, where it's going to come from? Which project will get there?
Well, it's a tricky question. I don't see mass adoption coming in 2020. I still think that the user interface with all cryptocurrencies is still lacking a lot for it to become actually mass adopted. Especially for Bitcoin, I see it more as a reserve asset, like a new type of gold. That's what I see. So I see people getting interested into companies that offer investments into Bitcoin, kind of a private banking way of doing that, but not actually holding their Bitcoin on their wallets and that kind of stuff. However, if we do have a breakthrough and we have like a company developing a smart contract that solves any practical problem that people are willing to go the extra mile and learn how to do it, and it's friendly enough, yeah, but I don't believe in mass adoption in 2020.
Thank you.
There cannot be mass adoption because every country is going to follow its own regulatory measures, and there will be scattered growth and maybe stamping out of all that unitary system of cryptocurrencies.
Wonderful.
I think the currency to watch is going to be the Libra from Facebook. Facebook has many billion users. I think if they get their regulatory hurdles taken care of, and people start to use it, and people start to actually purchase things with it, and it becomes a legitimate, understood currency, even though it's a stable coin, you're going to see, okay, now I get this. This is starting to work. You're going to see adoption on other levels. Let's hope they're not fraudulent, but like I said, it's going to be Facebook that's going to determine that trend and the rate that it's mass adopted.
Good point.
I think that we're going to see mass adoption a lot in those areas, in the financial areas that basically solve the problems with banking internationally. So I think that anybody that doesn't have a bank account or cannot have access to a bank account will turn over to blockchain and Bitcoin as a means of sending money to their families and or receiving money from their families, especially if the economy, depending on how the economy does. So I think the mass adoption, I think there will be more education, more mass adoption in that specific sector, as far as actually, from the end user side. So there's a lot of companies that are focusing right now, and I met a couple here that are, will, connect a credit card, for example, to a Bitcoin wallet, so they can, easily receive money from another country and then use that credit card locally. So I find that pretty cool. And then I think also, second, in the kind of the cloud computing side of things, where you have companies like Siacoin, which, for those of you not familiar, they do something like what Dropbox does and stores your information on the blockchain. I think we're going to see more adoption on the computing side of keeping your documents and safe on blockchain.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on this panel today. Let's hear it for our panelists.
Thank you very much, guys. I think it's better like this.
Watch your head, by the way.
Yeah.
Watch your heads.